Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode for the Aftermath series. Let us waste no time at all and dive into this rather interesting episode of Critical Role. So I kind of broke up the early discussion for this video into individual characters, since before the intermission everyone got a chance to sort of decide what they wanted to do for the 2 weeks that they had for downtime. So with Not, she did what she did before, where she sort of gathered things that she had picked up along the way, and she also purchased a few knickknacks and trinkets and a little bit of gold, and then she sent it off. Now, the theory that was floating around is that this stuff that she's sending is to the family or the Yeza, possibly. She's sending these things to them in hopes of supporting them, or just as a reminder that she still cares. That's sort of the theory that's going around. That's honestly the one that makes the most sense. I'm not really sure where else they could be going. Maybe she's completely lying about her past and she has a family that she's trying to send these to. Maybe she's sending them to her goblin clan, but that wouldn't really make sense and she doesn't really want anything to do with them. She also took it upon herself this episode to reverse engineer the pistol she stole from the guard in Hupperduke. It was kind of a nice little nod back to Percy and back to, his tinkering days, and we even got Taliesin to sort of explain how the gun worked, so it was nice to see a little bit of Percy again this episode. And it's an interesting point that maybe Not might be looking towards multi-classing into fighter and then taking the gunslinger if she becomes a bit more fascinated with how the firearms work and the alchemical properties and all of that stuff. So it'd be interesting to see if Not decides to take that path. And then she did, of course, do a little bit of tinkering more herself and constructed the explosive arrowhead. So it'll be interesting to see that in action. And then another thing she made that was rather interesting is she made these sort of human-like gloves. I can only assume it's to sort of help mask, because she does have that porcelain mask, and then when she puts the hood up, she's rather concealed. And so I suppose without having the wrappings that she normally has in her hands, she just has these nice gloves that may add to the disguise without having to actually use the spell Disguise Self. And then another thing that Not did in that episode is she wrote that letter with Jester to the Solstice Academy. And the letter was inquiring about the location of Astrid. Now, immediately when Not mentioned that name, Liam, sort of reacted the way he does, probably hit with emotion and like, oh god, Not, what are you doing? But I think it's very heartwarming and touching that Not is really looking out for Caleb and is doing everything in her power to try to make him happy and to maybe come to amends with what he's done in his past. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. I honestly don't think anything will come of it. If anything is to come of it, it's all going to be bad. Because I would wager that Trent Ickathon is looking for the three, Caleb, Astrid, and the name of the other fellow is escaping me. You guys will remind me in the comment section below. Thank you for that. I'm always very appreciative. So I can only assume bad things are going to happen with this letter. So we'll have to see what becomes of it and what impacts it'll have down the line. And then Caleb did his classic reading sessions. He was able to get into the library with Bo and do a lot of reading and delving into the history of the Xhorhas and trying to find information on the dodecahedron. I believe Matt has given all the information to us as he can in a moment, since I believe this story will eventually take us to Xhorhas. I assume more information will come of that when they get there, or maybe they'll come across a crick along the way and this crick will sort of sense the dodecahedron and they'll learn more about it that way. Who knows, we'll have to see. And it's also interesting that he's reading more into the Weave of Time and how to fix it or change what had happened. Now obviously with his readings he's discovered that it's very dangerous, very complicated. There's really no proof that it's actually worked, but that's probably not going to stop Caleb from trying to figure out some way to change what's happened. Now obviously the Wish spell comes to mind, and also the Deck of Many Things has a card that can alter the past. So those are two options that I'm unsure if Caleb is aware of those things. Maybe that's why he's doing reading, try to discover those things, but it hasn't come up, so it'll be interesting to see what Caleb decides to do and what new information may come to him down the line. And it would also be disgusting if, Trent came back and was trying to get Caleb back to his side and, baited him or tempted him with possibly bringing his parents back. That was just a terrible thought, and I really hope that doesn't happen. But I also kind of do hope that happens, because as bad as it is, that's super cool story-wise if Trent came back and was like, come back to me and I will resurrect your parents. I don't know, that sounds kind of cool to me. Obviously Mercer would do a way better job than I just did right there of weaving that into the story. But it would be interesting to see if Trent would bait Caleb into doing things that would go against the group. But one interesting thing that he did learn about is the dunamis, one of those two. But I guess it's this arcane object that can help with controlling time, if I understood it correctly. And I believe it's also located at the Soltris Academy. I could be misremembering. But that would be another reason for the group to head to Rexingtrum and try to gain access into the academy. So lots of interesting things, lots of information for Caleb to sort of sift through and process. So we'll have to see if it comes up again as they travel down to the Menagerie Coast in the next episode. Clay had a relatively calm and tame episode. He just mainly did a lot of shopping and tried to do some meditation where he had these epiphanies that he had before, which is the reason why he's in the group in the first place. But unfortunately, with all that was going on, he's not used to the city life. He was unfortunately not able to have that epiphany. But he was able to learn and create some healing potions, which will be super handy on the road and down the line. I'm hoping and I'm sure that he will be able to make more powerful potions down the line. The Mighty Nine is going to save a lot of money on potions, that's for sure. But then Clay and Jester also did meet a rather intriguing NPC this episode. I can't quite remember the name. It's like Suvro's Secrets, something like that. A rather mysterious dragonborn, the owner of this sort of tent shop with a sack of random stuff. Lots of interesting stuff, actually. All of it's probably useless, but I'm always a fan of nice little flavor trinkets, so I'm not complaining. And Ford had a rather boring, but could have been potentially interesting 2 weeks where he decided to go alone to the Menagerie Coast to try to get information on the letter that they found. It seems that perhaps there's something serious or a huge plot point in the Menagerie Coast, since although Ford did roll low on his investigation check, so it could just be that. But it seemed like Matt was going to try to divert his path anyways, because I feel like there's a lot in the Menagerie Coast that Matt will want the entire group to be present for. So it's possible that even with very good investigation rolls, Matt would have tried to send him back towards the dash to the rest of the group. And he spent a lot of his time just trying to focus on his sword, trying to understand it a little bit more. I'm really curious to see what this sort of entity has in store for Ford. Obviously, Ford isn't the first person to have these sort of powers with this sort of eye and this patron, since his captain also had this maybe not this weapon, but he had the eye, the crystal, as we learned from the vision that Ford had when he first received the crystal. So I'm wondering if there's more followers of this patron or more people with this power. One of them could be that fellow that sabotaged the boat and sort of sent Ford into the depths of the ocean only to be thrown onto shore and saved by his patron. I'm really hoping we can see soon how that's all connected and how Ford fits into all of this, and maybe it's not just a coincidence that he survived and who this Sabian fellow is. I just want answers at this point. That's all I want. I need to know. And then he also had his meeting with the gentleman and then a small conversation with Creed the Tabaxi. It really feels like the gentleman likes Ford. It seems that in their past meetings, the gentleman has directed his conversation towards Ford, or at least included him specifically in the conversation in some way, whether he's looking at him or actually speaking towards him. But it seems like there's some sort of respect towards Ford from the gentleman. And especially so in this episode, since he had a private meeting with the gentleman. Obviously, the gentleman is very intrigued with the Mighty Nine in general, but maybe there's a little bit more to Ford that the gentleman is curious about. And then, obviously, the very upsetting conversation with Cree, where Ford had to break the news that Molly has departed, and Cree sort of shared her dreams that she had, feelings of being alone and cold. Very tragic that she has to deal with the loss of Lucian once again. But we did learn a little bit more information, and hopefully we will learn all of it, but I will be completely satisfied with not knowing anything and just leaving it up to theories, because that's what Molly would want, right? And Bo had a rather straightforward 2 weeks where she mainly did training. She was trying to look for Dyron, maybe to talk about, her experiences that she's had, maybe to look for guidance. But then she settled with Tubo and just did a little bit of sparring. But it's possible, since the last time they had a conversation, they sort of talked about the dodecahedron. And Dyron was saying, well, if you find something like this, bring it to me. And obviously they had the dodecahedron at the time, but they did not turn it into her. So it's possible she would have brought it up again to Dyron if Dyron was present. And maybe she would have brought it to her. I would really hope she doesn't, because I feel like they would hold on to it and not let them take it back, given the fact that it's a very powerful object. But now, Jester. Oh man. Jester had a rather, how would you put it? Rough, chaotic. Words can't capture what she went through with Nut. But it all worked out in the end, so I guess there's that. But she should probably be careful. Now, I know she only cares about pleasing the Traveler, but with all of this messing of other gods' temples, they probably don't like that too much. So maybe down the line, she will be angering multiple gods, and she will have a whole lot to deal with. And maybe the Traveler can't help her. Now, obviously, the Traveler is this very powerful being, but not necessarily a god, since gods tend to be seen as these all-knowing beings, and the Traveler was stumped by the dodecahedron. Now, I was scared, along with many people in Twitch chat and probably many people that are watching this. I thought he was going to want to take it, but luckily he did not. But he was rather intrigued by it, and was, as I said before, he wasn't really sure what it was or what it was capable of, which just adds to the mystery of this weird object. But it also was, just in general, a very touching moment that Jester had with the Traveler, after her belief wasn't necessarily shaken, but she was concerned that the Traveler wasn't with her. And of course the Traveler reassured her that he is always with her. And they're going to have a meetup. Traveler Con is coming up next year, and we'll get to see the other followers of the Traveler, and maybe the Traveler will reveal who he is. Who knows? But that's going to be a ways down the line, but I am still super stoked and interested to see what happens with that. And now that does it for what all the characters did in that episode. So now we are jumping to after the intermission. So I touched on a little bit of Ford already with, Sabian, and the connection with the crystal, and how it's all connected, and what's going to happen with all that. But we got another sort of a rehash of Ford's story, since he already explained it to Molly, but he explained it again to the group, and we got a little more details, I suppose. But it just adds more motivation and drive to the party to want to go to the Menagerie Coast and figure out what the heck is going on. Obviously, Sabian is connected with the sabotaging of the ship. We just don't quite know why. But it obviously could all come back to the crystal. But if it does, why? Like, what is so important about this crystal? Obviously, the crystal is connected to the patron, but why is the patron important? Why did the captain have the crystal beforehand? Why did the crystal choose Ford? Is Sabian working alone? Is he working for a higher up? Does he also possess the powers of the crystal? And there can be only one. There's so many questions, and I'm so glad that the party has decided to move towards the Menagerie Coast, just because I feel like there's so many interesting plot points down there, not only with Ford, but also with Jester, since that is the home of her mother. So it will be very interesting to see what comes of that, and hopefully we'll see an interaction between Jester and her mother. And we're still looking for Jester's dad. That was her whole motivation at the beginning of Season 2. It feels like she's completely forgotten about that, but maybe it'll come back up when she goes back to meet with her mother. Maybe she'll be like, did you find your father? Or something along the lines of that. But what can we expect from the Menagerie Coast? Probably quite a bit. It's likely a very colorful town, probably a very different tone from the Empire, from what we've seen. I'm sure Molly would have loved the Menagerie Coast, but unfortunately, he will not be able to experience it. But I'm super excited. I love the whole sea vibe, the sailors, the whimsical nature of the people that probably live in the Menagerie Coast. I guess it's very rich and, as I said before, colorful. We're going to meet a lot of new interesting people, I assume. And Bo and Caleb have never been outside the Empire, so this will be a nice experience for them. And I'm sure Not hasn't been out of the Empire either. Or Caduceus. So it really is just Ford and Jester that have been out here. So it'll be a new experience for most of the group. And as Caleb said in the episode, he's never been to the beach before, so I am hoping we get a beach episode. Every campaign needs one. It's super fun and relaxing, and it'll just be so hilarious to see Caleb trying to relax in the sun, and Jester probably poking fun, and Bo and Ford going at it, not trying to do her best to fit in. Caduceus probably doing like the people with like the metal detectors at the beach. I bet Caduceus would do something like that, looking for like seashells or something. I'm just super excited, and I really hope we get to see that while they're down there. But then just a couple more things before we wrap up this episode. Not and Caleb had another interesting conversation. It seems that Not is now ready to possibly face her past. She said that she was willing to go back to where she was from, back to where her sort of tribe roamed around, and she was ready to face them. Now that she's sort of built up this relationship and she's with people she trusts and can count on, she feels safe and ready to face her past. And I had an interesting thought about Not and Caleb's relationship. It feels similar to Jester's and the Traveler's relationship. We have Jester, who gets her abilities from the Traveler because her faith in him is so strong. We have Caleb, who is a very powerful, or gaining in power, wizard, who has taught Not how to use certain abilities. And Not and Caleb both sort of rely on each other to accomplish different things, which is also similar to the Traveler and Jester. The Jester looks to the Traveler for guidance, and the Traveler looks to her to sort of spread the word of the Traveler. But what made me think of this very minor connection between these two relationships is back when Jester and the Traveler were having their meeting, Jester said something along the lines of, "You wouldn't let anything bad happen to me, would you?" And the Traveler replied with something along the lines of, "If it's within my power, of course I'll help you." He didn't say exactly that, but that was the message he was conveying. Now, Not and Caleb, when they were having their conversation, Not said almost the exact same thing Jester said, and then Caleb said almost the exact same thing the Traveler said. So when that happened, it sort of made me think of a possible connection between the two relationships, and so I just started thinking about that. Obviously, it probably doesn't mean anything, but it was just an interesting connection that I thought of. But anyways, that'll about do it for this episode. We got a lot of new information, and we're going to be heading to a new location, so I'm super excited for everything that's going to be in store for next week and for many weeks to come, since I assume they're probably going to be in the Menagerie Coast for quite some time. They have quite a mystery on their hands and a lot of information to sift through. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of The Aftermath, and I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of Critical Role, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good night, everyone.